Hi there, my name is Bill. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Fretboard Refugee. This is the first installment of what I hope to be a regular weekly show. This is called Theory Thursday. Now, since this is the first installment, we're going to be looking at the key of D, but we're also going to be talking about what a key is, how it works, what a relative minor is, what notes and what chords are acceptable in the key of D, and how to think about a key and what it means, and really how to transpose things from one key to another. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're not going to go into too much detail as we move along here. We are going to probably not go through every possible key, but we're going to talk about some of the more common keys, how they relate to tunings, how they relate to the fretboard, what the advantages or disadvantages of a given key are in standard tuning or in an alternate tuning. I invite you to also check out my Alternate Tuning Tuesday show. We have done, so far we've done Open D, Drop D, and Open G. So two of those are tunings that are pretty focused on the key of D. So we talked a little bit in those shows about why you might want to use those tunings, because the D major chord on guitar, one of the first chords that many of us learn. It's an easy chord to finger, but it's just down there on 4 strings. So it can be kind of anemic compared to something like a G major chord, which uses all the strings and rings loud and proud, or an E minor, which it lends itself to aggressive strumming because you don't have to skip any strings, you don't have to miss any of the bass strings, and you have those powerful bass notes carrying the chord. But D, you're down there on the treble strings, and of course you have options. Don't get me wrong, you have bar chords you can use, you have other voicings you can use elsewhere on the neck, but let's just talk about the concept of a key. What a key is the set of all notes and chords built around a certain starting note, which we call the tonic. So for an idea of what a D major scale looks like, we're going to start with a D note. We can get a D note, that's the one note, the first note, the tonic of the key of D major, by hitting the open D string. And major scales, there's a regular set of intervals, there's a regular set of semitones and tones that define what a major scale is. Now the D major scale, we're going to start with D. We're going to go up 2 semitones. And this is of course E. I'm going to go up another 2 semitones, which takes us to F sharp. Why is that F sharp? Because there is no such thing as an F flat or an E sharp. So the third is going to be that F sharp. Now, if we want to get the flat third, get a blue note, that would just be a regular F. But 1 semitone from E takes us to F sharp. What happens after F sharp? We go up 1 full tone from E takes us to F sharp. Since the formula for a major scale is tonic, 2 semitones, 2 semitones, 1 semitone, the 4th note is going to be right here. This is going to be a G. Now, again, we're going to skip 2 semitones, getting us to A. Another 2 semitones takes us to B. And we go up to a C sharp. And because we have gone 7 notes, we start the cycle again at D. We go up 1 semitone, and here's D that's 1 octave up on the 12th fret. Of course, it's a general fact about how the guitar works that because there are 12 semitones in the musical alphabet, 12 possible notes, the open string is always going to be 1 octave down from the 12th fret. So D, an octave up. Now, you don't have to just play the scale on 1 string. if you want to do this in a positional way, we just use the relevant pentatonic shape and play the major scale on it. So there's our D, there's our E, F sharp, G, there's our A, there's our B, there's our C sharp, and there we are at the root again. That's D an octave up. So we won't get into modes today with one exception. We are going to talk about the minor scale. The minor scale is built around the sixth note of the major scale, which in this case is going to be B. This gives us what's called the relative minor scale of our major scale. So the relative minor of D major is B minor. So B minor, we would start a couple tones before the second fret of the A string here. There's our D. It's now the third of the minor scale. Oh, I went one too far because that right there was our B, which is an octave. If we keep going with the shape, we get back here to D, the root of the major. So let's talk about how major and minor keys work together. As we just saw, the D major scale and the B minor scale contain all the same notes. You just start and stop in a different place to get a full rotation through the scale. Well, what does that mean for chordal structure? That means you have the same set of chords that are acceptable chords to go to in D major and B minor. You will just build it around the B minor as the one instead of the D major as the one. So let's look at what those chords are based on that scale. So the one chord is obviously going to be D major. Now in a major key, you go to the minor of the two. So that's going to be E minor. The 3 is also going to be minor. That takes us to F sharp minor. So that is like an E minor shape, but barring the second fret. Now the 4 is going to be major. If you follow my blues material, you know the 1, the 4, and the 5 are central to any 12-bar blues progression. So that takes us up to E, F. That takes us to G. And the G major, there's a few different versions of this. This is the easy 3-finger version. You can also add the ring finger on the 3rd fret of the B string here. Gives you a little fuller sound. You can also mute the A string for the full bluegrass G major. Sounds pretty similar, but it's still a rich ringing G chord. Now if you're going to play blues, you're going to want the G7, which kind of like sits between major and minor. It can be a beautiful chord. Then we go to the A major. Now there's a couple different ways to finger this. I'm partial to using all 3 fingers on all 3 notes. You probably know this chord. That's your A major. And for blues, you're going to want the A7, where you just skip that middle string. So that's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now 6, again, we're going to be minor. And that gives us the good old B minor. That was a chord I couldn't play at first, but it's become one of my favorites. Now, little complication here. The 7 chord is technically going to be diminished. So we want a C sharp diminished chord, which we're going to make this kind of D shape, 1 string lower. And we're going to grab the A string here on the 4th fret, and we're going to avoid the high and low E strings or mute them. There's your C sharp diminished. So those are the chords that you find within D major, and also the chords you find within B minor. So what would a 12-bar blues progression look like in D major? Well, we probably want to make the D a 7th chord because we're playing the blues here. So we play whatever we're going to play on D7 for our first 4 bars. Then we switch to the G7 chord, which can be a hard one for me to finger sometimes. 2 bars of that, then we head back to the D7. Then we have the A, playing the bar variation there. You can also use an A7, although some music theory people will tell you that you don't ever want to use the 7 of the 5 chord in a 12-bar blues, that you want to keep that that major sound, at least for the 5 chord, because let's face it, you're only playing the 5 chord for 1 to 2 bars, depending on which 12-bar variation you play of the entire structure, and that can provide some valuable contrast. So that is what we have for chords in the key of D. Now the key of D is a pretty accessible key on the guitar for most progressions. It does have some disadvantages though. Like we talked about when we were examining opening tunings, you know, you're playing on the 4 skinniest strings for most voicings of a D major, which can be a little quieter. You can make up for that with an electric. But if we just compare, let's say an A minor on 5 strings, there's a small but imperceptible drop of volume that changes the dynamics of the song. This is where you might want to use a tuning like, for instance, drop D tuning, where you drop this low E string to D. That way you have an open D, or you have a more powerful D, or you can hit that bass note before you hit the strings down here, and you can get that more powerful D sound. So I'm not gonna go into drop D tuning here and now, but what would that sound like? Well, if we get ourselves into, let's see, that's what your D bass note's gonna sound like. So if you imagine those together, you have a much richer chord. That can be a beautiful thing if that's what you're going for. You also have open D available, which turns the entire guitar open into a D chord. That can be a fun thing to play with if you're playing in D, because it gives you a much richer sound. We're not going to talk about D minor today, but there is also open D minor tuning, which can create this really haunting, ethereal, spooky kind of sound that you can, harmonize scales with. We might explore that in a future alternate tuning Tuesday. Most of your chords are going to be fairly accessible. You've got 2 bar chords there that you're going to have to learn. Not necessarily for the blues because they're your minors, but B minor, you're basically going to have that A minor shape. You're going to bar the 2nd fret. Technically, you want to avoid that low E string on B minor. Now your F sharp major, that's your E minor shape, barred on the 2nd fret, moved down to the 4th fret instead of the 2nd. That's a fun little chord that pops up in a lot of songs that have an E major in them too. So like a song like, what's a good example? Oh, Tuesday's Gone, Lynyrd Skynyrd. You're gonna have an A, you're gonna go to E, and then you can just slide that down. There's your F sharp. then you go to D. That gives you a fun little hand trick you can do. Instead of fingering your E major like this with your index finger on that G string, you just move everything over one finger, so you're fingering with the middle finger. Then you just slide these fingers down, lift the middle, and bar with the index. That makes it easy to transition between your E major and your F sharp minor. Although technically that's not an issue in D because you'd just be using the E minor. So that can just, you don't even have to worry about this finger. You can go E minor, E sharp minor. As a general rule, a lot of country and rock songs are gonna make heavy use of the 6th chord. In this case, that's the B major, or I'm sorry, the B minor. And the 1, 4, 5. Sometimes the 2, which was an E minor, which is really easy to get to too. Like a very common soul and R&B progression is going to be 2, 5, 1. So that might look like trying to think of something that's in this key that's playable in acoustic, so I can give you an example of that real quick. One thing that comes to mind is that Michelle Branch song she played with Santana that I think was originally a Tina Turner song. Let's see, how does that go? I believe the basic a fun thing to play, but it uses that traditional like R&B and soul progression where you're in the key of D, but you don't really start on D. You start on the 2nd, go to the tonic, 2nd, tonic, 2nd, tonic, and then you play with that 4 and 5 dynamic, the G and the A, when you get to the end of that cycle. So it'll be like E minor, D, E minor, D, E minor, D, G, A, E minor, D, like that. Kind of goes up and down. It gives it a very like swingy, dancey feel. Can't think of a lot of songs that I play regularly that are actually in the key of D that don't involve alternate tunings, and I'm not going to get into that today. Frankly, I'm not set up for it, and I've already covered it in the other show. One more thing about keys and how they function and how to read them is what's called a key signature. To give you a kind of 40,000 foot view of what key signatures are and why they matter, let's take a C major scale. So that goes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. What do you notice about that? Well, they're all natural notes. Every single one of those notes is a letter without a sharp or a flat after it. That's because for C, the way the musical alphabet functions, the 12 tones that belong to 7 letters, let me just explain that really quick if you're not familiar. The musical alphabet goes A sharp, B flat, B, C, there's no such thing as a B sharp, C sharp, D flat, D, D sharp, E flat, E, F, there's no such thing as an E sharp or an F flat, F sharp, G flat, G, G sharp, A flat, back to A. So that gives you 12 tones, but 7 letters. Those letters are completely arbitrary. My theory is that piano people invented the language of Western music, and on the piano, C is the most accessible key because you never need the black keys. There is no sharp, there is no flat. It's just C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Because of that, if you're reading music or tablature that's fully filled out for a piece in the key of C, it's just going to have that treble clef, and there's not going to be any sharps or flat signs next to it. That is the key signature. Now, if you're in the key of G major, the people's key, the most easy guitar key, in my opinion, there's a case to be made for E, you're going to see one of those sharps there. Well, why is that? Well, let's look at it. Because the G major scale goes G, A, B, B flat, I'm sorry, B sharp, let me think about this for a second. I'm embarrassed that I have to look this up, but okay. G major scale goes G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So that's one sharp. So you will see treble clef with a little sharp next to it. And if they've really done their homework, that sharp symbol is going to be on the line that corresponds with the F. That's not always the case when you're looking at tablature. There's a lot of shortcuts taken. So let's go back to that D major scale that we just covered. How many sharps or flats do you remember there being? There was C sharp, and there was F sharp. So there's going to be two little sharps next to that symbol. So if you see a treble clef with two little pound signs or hashtags next to it, you know you are in the key of D. Or, you know, the key of B minor, which amounts to the same thing. There is no, to the best of my knowledge, there's no instrument that comes to mind that is native to the key of B, or to the key of D, or the key of B minor. Now, there are some keys where the existence of an instrument is going to make that key very common for certain kinds of music. And I'm mostly talking about B flat here. Why B flat? Well, saxophones are in B flat. And a saxophone is an instrument like a harmonica where one key is going to be attainable and other keys are going to require tricks or shortcuts like bending notes. Because the saxophone is so important in jazz, certain kinds of rock, big band music, etc., a lot of songs are written in a key that the saxophone can play in, and the guitarists just have to cope. One of the big challenges of the guitar is that there's some keys where everything is going to be a bar chord or a weird voicing or strings are skipped. That can be challenging, but the huge advantage of the guitar is you can play in every possible key. You got to learn some tricks, you got to learn some shortcuts, you got to learn some bar chords, but there is no key you can't play on. This is an entirely chromatic instrument. If you want to play a C sharp note, you know, that's something you can do. If you want to play, an A sharp, that's something you can do, or B flat, same thing. Now, there are some other keys on some other instruments that are just easier to get to. A lot of guitar songs are going to be written in E and G because those are just the easiest guitar keys. You can get through most common chord progressions without a bar, without anything fancy, without muting strings, anything like that. There's other instruments, like take the ukulele for instance, that goes C, G, E, A. So you have a lot of songs in the key of C, and C is going to be a very common guitar key too. You see a lot of C in along with E, A, D. You see a lot of that in the old fingerstyle blues because that's a very easy chord to finger in the first position, and you can get some cool fingerstyle riffs out of it. D is, you'll see a lot of D variants in songs that aren't necessarily fixed in one key. You'll see a lot of D2s, D4s. You'll see some like D over Bs, where you might pick up a note on the A string, or a D over F, where you'll pick up a note on the E string to serve as a kind of passing chord between two other chords. And again, D is one of the easiest chords to get to, and you have some cool voicings up and down the neck. Like, let's look at the so-called Neil Young chord that appears in the song Old Man. So that's going to be, that's a very cool sound, and it lends itself, because you're really just fingering two strings, it lends itself to a kind of like hammer-on dynamic where the texture of the chord changes. You can see I'm coming on and off that 5th fret of the G string. Your conventional D can lift off one finger and have a D2 and play with those textures. One trick I like to do if I'm playing chordal blues is to kind of create this diamond shape right here. So this is a D major, but I can just lift that pinky and be in a D7. So that's a pretty cool, like, swingy, jumpy effect that you can get going. We have a lot of variants of D up and down these bottom strings. You have some very cool variants of D in, let's say, drop D or open D tuning. We might explore those more in Theory Thursday in the future, or more likely Alternate Tuning Tuesday. I'm going to try to learn and play a couple songs that make use of these D things over the next couple of weeks and add them to the channel. It's been a busy couple of weeks. I haven't really done many performances on here, although I'm trying to catch up with my more educational content. I think that's enough for a first episode. Thinking about what we're going to do next week in Theory Thursday. And I'm thinking it might be valuable to kind of cover a more obscure key. Like, I'll just go ahead and say, let's do B flat major and see what we can get out of that. That means we're going to talk a little about bar chords. We're going to talk a little about voicings. We're going to flesh out that whole major, minor, and mode concept maybe a little bit more, although I don't want to go into too much detail about that. I also might want to do a specific episode on the pentatonic scales, major and minor, how they relate to the major scales, and what you can do with that. So thank you very much for your time. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends. I really appreciate you tuning in. This is Bill Callahan signing off.